Hi everyone. Today I'm doing something a little bit different in that I'm making a 100% whole grain sourdough loaf of bread, but I'm going to be fermenting this dough. Instead of using a regular sourdough starter made of wheat or rye flour as I normally would do, I'm going to be fermenting this dough using oats, fermented oats. Now I got this idea from Andrea and Alison from the Ancestral Kitchen podcast, and they are amazing fermenters. They ferment everything and I'm getting a lot of inspiration from them. But in one of their podcast episodes they were talking about fermented oats and fermented oats porridge, and I thought, wow, I wonder what that tastes like. And anyway, I had to try it out. Turns out it's very nice. And then I started thinking, I wonder if I could use that fermented oats as a starter for my bread. Now, to make these fermented oats, and I've got a great big bowl of it here, you just started off by mixing water and rolled oats with lots of water compared to the oats, and I'll give you the ratios. And I just started it off originally with a teaspoon or two of sourdough starter and let that ferment. And then if you want to keep going with the fermented oats, you can just keep it going like a sourdough starter. When you're getting low on oats, you just add more rolled oats and add more water and feed it up, and it keeps going. And you can eat that, make porridge out of it, and it's really nice. The way that I know that this is ready to make the bread is it doesn't really rise like a regular sourdough starter does, because for starters, it's a pretty wet mix. You probably could make it drier and wait for it to rise, but I originally, and still want to be able to use this to make porridge out of, fermented porridge, and it's winter time here, so you know, it's all about the porridge. But basically what you do is you can smell it. You know, it should smell a little bit sour, but this is the trick. You just taste some. So I just put some in a little bowl and I taste it, and what you're looking for is some sourness in the flavour, so that lemony, tart, you know, lacto-fermented taste. And you're also looking for a bit of fizz, so you want to be able to feel the carbonation. I did taste this before, but I'll taste it again. It's definitely tangy, and I can feel the fizz of that on my tongue. So I know that is carbonating, and it's perfect to make this loaf of bread. I did make this bread. I made quite a few versions of it, but to be honest with you, the very first one that I made, where I didn't think about it at all, I just threw it together and I barely weighed anything, that was the best one. And I'm going to try and replicate that very first loaf that I made. So I'm just going to mill my wheat to start with. I've got 350 grams of whole white hard wheat. You could use any wheat you like. I'm just using this one. I use this as the base for most of my recipes because it is the most affordable for me. I love spelt and other grains, but they are more expensive, so I tend to use this one as much as I can. And we'll just mill that up. I'm just going to make this recipe with the flour still warm from milling. It's not very hot, but it is a bit warm. And I'm going to use that to my advantage today because it is the middle of winter. We had the solstice on the weekend, so it is quite cool weather. So I'm going to use this temperature to my advantage. As I said, the very first version of this bread I ever made was the best one. So this is what I did. I had roughly about 350 grams of wheat flour. To that, I added 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed. The reason why I added that was because I really love flax in my bread, and I add it in all the time. You don't see that in my videos, but lots of my breads have that stuff in it. And when you're using lots of another ingredient that doesn't have gluten in it, adding some kind of jelly-like ingredient like ground flax or chia seeds. Oh, the birds outside are so loud. Adding something like that can really help to bind the loaf, if you're using enough water, that is. So I add 2 tablespoons of flax. I think I had about 1 teaspoon of salt. So I put that in. And then I mix those around. It's very easy, this bread. This just makes a small loaf in my small little Jamie Oliver loaf tin. You could double this if you had a really big pan, big Pullman pan or something. But just mix the salt and the ground flax in really, really well, because we're not doing a lot of mixing of this dough. Then to that, all I did was I got my fermented oats and I didn't weigh it, I just added about 1.5 cups of this stuff. So this is a 1/2 cup measure, so I'm going to add 3 of these roughly. So there's 1, you can see it's a bit bubbly, 2 and 3. Now for the water in this recipe, I didn't measure it the first time. I just mixed it all through and added enough water until I thought it was right. So I'm going to do that again because I have no idea how much to add. I'm just going to go by feel. But what I've done is I've measured 500 mils, so that's 500 grams of water in this jug, and I'm going to calculate how much I've used after I've made the dough. So I'm just going to pour some in. I'm just eyeballing it. This is how I always made my bread. I only started getting precise with things a couple of years ago, when more people wanted to know how many grams of this and how many grams of that. And also when I started milling my grains, it was a little bit easier to have things in gram amounts. But this is the old school way. You do get to know consistencies, and in some ways I think there's actually a lot of wisdom in doing it this way for whole grain sourdough baking, because as a lot of you know, my Australian wheat in particular seems to be a lot more thirsty, and spelt as well. It does seem to be able to take a lot more water than other people's doughs, breads. So learning to go by what it looks like and what it feels like, rather than how much water was stated in the recipe, is probably a good idea. Anyway, that's something to continue debating and discussing. I like to make this dough quite wet. The first one I made, I'll show some photos of the dough itself. You can see that it's quite wet. Yeah, this is looking around about right. So it's quite a wet dough. Oh, that's going to be so good. I've got a good feeling about this. I'm going to add a tiny little bit more. Yeah, that's enough. I think that's about enough. That's about perfect. But you know, none of this is perfect anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Look everybody, I found a new spatula. For those of you who have known me for a long time, you will know how exciting that is. I will put some links to where I found that below. It's the coolest thing. I'm making my breads the way I used to. Yay! All right, that's perfect. Look at that. It's nice and soft and squidgy, but it is still a dough. It's not a batter. That is gorgeous. So all I'm going to do now is leave that for the rest of the day. It is 8:30 in the morning now, and I wanted to get this one started early because I do have to go out tonight and I need to bake this before I go out. So I'm going to leave this. It's a little bit warm, but many of you will be in summertime at the moment, so you may want to use cold water to slow it down. You really have to gauge the temperatures according to your environment. but we'll just let this ferment. Basically, I just want to look for it to rise, and then once it looks fermented and pretty well risen, I'm just going to shape it and bake it in a little tin, and that'll be it. So I'll see you later on. Well, here we are. It is now 2:30 in the afternoon, so it's been 6 hours that this dough has been fermenting. I did put it in a warm oven, just turned on and then turned off after 30 seconds or so, just because it was a cold day and I didn't want to wait till the evening because I do have to go out. So I have sped this up a little bit, but if you're in summertime, you will not need to do that. It's very well fermented. You can see it's quite jiggly. See all the bubbles? It's kind of falling out of the bowl there. But yeah, it's super well fermented. So the final proof probably won't take too long. All I'm going to do to shape this, I haven't touched this since I mixed it this morning. So there hasn't been any gluten development of any kind. All I'm going to do is just fold this with this bendy spatula, just gently, kind of in the bowl, just to pull it together a little bit. I don't want to knead it too much or anything. That's probably all I really want to do. And just spray a little bit of water on the bench because I'm too lazy to clean up flour on the bench. I like the water method, as probably most of you know. Now I'm just going to try and shape this a little bit. It feels really nice. It feels really soft. I hope I haven't overdone it. Just want to get it into a kind of loose shape for this little tin here. Sticky, very sticky. I'm going to plonk it in there. Push it down a bit and fingers crossed. All right, it's looking pretty similar to the first one I made. I'm going to bake this when it's getting to the top of the edge of the tin. So it'll be probably about 1.5 times the volume of that when I bake it. And I'm going to put it in here to sit while it proofs so it doesn't dry out, and I'm going to set the timer for probably 45 minutes to begin with, and I'll come back when it's ready to bake. Well, the bread is ready to bake now. It's risen kind of over the top of the tin. It's pretty jiggly. It's pretty good. It's been about 90 minutes for that proof, but you'll have to time your proof depending on the temperature of your dough and your climate. So I'll get that in the oven now. Well, here it is. It's looking pretty good. Looks a bit different to the other one, but that seems to be, always the case with home bread baking. Wow, gee, it smells amazing. Crust looks good. This bread has a really different crust. You can only really tell when you toast it, but it's kind of really light and crispy when you toast the crust. I don't know why it is like that, but it's amazing. Anyway, that's the bread. We'll let it cool overnight and I'll cut it in the morning. Beautiful. Good morning. Back for a crumb shot the next morning. Let's see how this bread looks. It certainly smells amazing. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Oh, it smells so good. It's very moist. I could probably reduce the water in that a little bit. Ah, that looks so good. Oh, sorry about the train going in the background. Well, there you have it, everyone. That's the bread. It turned out very good. I'm really happy with that. It's an absolutely beautiful soft bread. It makes excellent toast, really good for sandwiches. It looks very moist, but it's not gummy. Oh, and it smells divine. I'll taste them a bit later. But that's it. Hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Bye. See you in the next one.